All right, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. I have to stay in between the flags for the people online, so you're going to see me just like darting between flags today. And why did it switch? Hold on. Technical difficulties. There we go. Hopefully it'll stay with us. Welcome. We're glad to see so many people in the room. Hopefully my email was not too, we have an opportunity here to really make literacy great in the state, and I think having your voices in that conversation is critical. So thank you for taking the time to come locally today. I know we have quite a few that still have to be online. I know your lives are busy, but this is kind of one of those moments where we could make great things happen for Utah, or we could cause the crash and burn. So we have spent probably November 15th is when we were told literacy block idea of putting all this money together as one kind of coming source. Then there was Thanksgiving in between, so I did nothing. And then we came back this week and said, oh, we're really ratcheting this up. The board wants to hear about it next week. So luckily we have you this week to kind of help us make sure we're on the right path and give us more direction, change our minds. We've come up with new accountability, kind of what we're thinking. We have new, like, if you fail, what happens? So there's a lot of parameters we'll talk about today. But really nothing is set in stone. This is the opportunity to say, hey, that's crazy, Jennifer and Sarah. Let's do this instead. That is why you're all here. We need you to be able to be supportive voices for whatever we come up with, and your superintendents to be willing to go kind of fight for it on the Hill. So big changes coming definitely in the next legislative season. In terms of just your agenda, you have kind of a more detailed one, but these are kind of the big key points. We're really going to focus on that K-3 literacy, which Sarah and I have talked about trying to expand to be elementary literacy, so you could serve students who aren't, where they should be by the end of third grade, that we'd be able to do some intervention with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders with those dollars as you find appropriate. So it wouldn't be mandatory that you would serve K-6, but you have the opportunity to do so, or K-5, depending on your buildings. And then we'll go back and revisit those elements of effective literacy instruction that you gave us feedback on last time. We took your feedback and modified the rubric tool and then kind of get that last round of feedback so we can build the actual data entry tool and finish that up. Sarah will take you through some state rostering updates. We know it's been growing pains. Hopefully December goes more smoothly, but we'll take some opportunities to kind of help facilitate some smoother movement there. Then I'll do kind of an update on the K-3 reading software, what the results of the study was. This may come up in the conversation that we talk about in terms of braiding the funding sources together, but in general, software is not working, just to kind of highlight that notion there. And then other updates, kind of professional learning, some things from assessment, and others. All right, so to start with, really looking at just a quick update for you, those that are Amplifi users. They are going to have Pathways of Progress reports at MOY for your teachers starting December 8th. So if you're an Amplifi district, this was not possible last year. We had to send you reports. That is no longer the case. You'll be able to pull your own kind of typical or better progress, see where schools, teachers, students are across your system. So that will be released December 8th. So if you're starting, the testing window is December 1st. Within that kind of first week or so, you'll start to see this MOI report, which will tell you what pathway they're on versus what pathway was set for them, if one's been set. If one hasn't been set, you'll just get to know what pathway they are on between BOI and MOI. If you're an Amplifi user, DMG already has this functionality, so you already have this option. So they'll just be kind of the sub-measures, so you'll have it not only for like their composite, but for fluency or retail or whatever components you might look at, you'll have those pathways for each sub-measure. Okay, and so there's just some slides in here that kind of describe it. You have the PowerPoint slides. You can go back and view those. I don't take too long on the Amplifi stuff because not all of you are Amplifi users. Okay. All right, so state of the state, this is a conversation that I hope you can really invest some time and energy in. I started with it because I was like, they'll be fresh at 9 a.m. By 11, we might be like, Jennifer, we've had enough type experience. So as I said, the board has asked for us to come present to them on December 4th. Options for, number one, where are we as a state? You all know where we are. We've done that kind of presentation with you before. About 73% of third graders are reading on grade level according to DIBELS. There is a question around, should we move to Lexiles for that kind of metric to say, really, if you're talking about reading on grade level, DIBELS is not really the metric for that. So looking at, we get Lexiles from DIBELS now. We're kind of pulling that data to see what percentage of kids are reading at a 740 Lexile. 790 is the end of year target in third grade. But when you look at Lexiles, they recommend 100 below and 50 above is kind of your range. So we were going to go down to 740 as kind of our target if you're a on-target third grade reader. We've got the data from DMG from last year, and we're working on getting the data from Amplifi to say, if we went Lexile just for kind of a metric to communicate to the legislature and the board what percentage of kids are reading on grade level, what would that look like in comparison to like Dibbles or Sage? Because Sage is more like 45%. Then you have Dibbles at 73. I think our Lexile would be kind of a component. Another part of that conversation that assessment's working on is having a Lexile produced from Sage. So your Sage score would give you a Lexile as well. So that's something that might come in the next little while, probably the next iteration of Sage, just to kind of keep you in mind. So legislative and board interest is why you are here about this topic today. So this started November 1st when I sent you out the scary email about K3 being rolled up into the WPU. If you remember that email, many of you were like, that's a bad idea. We know. But I have to send it neutrally to you all. So in terms of the WPU, we're still presenting that option to the board because we've been told by the legislature to do so. What would happen generally if you don't understand WPU is it's spread through a K-12 system. So schools that currently don't get K-3 money would end up getting K-3 money, so your dollars would be reduced at the local level. So for example, a charter school that only serves 6 through 12 currently would not be receiving K-3 money, but if it was rolled in the WPU, it would then be divided out into those schools that don't generally get those funds. So your pot would get smaller in terms of what you would get at probably your district level. So we weren't super satisfied about that. But when it came back on November 15th, they're like, hey, why don't we just roll all the literacy programs into one big pot of money and let the LEAs decide how to spend it, which I think has some potential. So we're going to talk about which funding sources they're talking about and some opportunity there. We will be presenting these ideas to the board on December 4th during study session. So if you want to listen in or you want to come down and be part of the conversation, feel free to. We're going to kind of present what we're presenting to you today after your feedback and kind of refining it, of course, to the board. So in terms of our strategic plan, the board has kind of 3 main imperatives that we work with. How I see this one fitting in is our system values piece, which is really setting those conditions for students to be successful through, effective practices, strategies, efficiencies, resources, and policies. So this kind of gives the opportunity to connect there. Maybe. So unfortunately, I did not have time to screencast Sarah and my face onto the Fast and Furious 4, but we are working fast and furious because it's a short timeline. This will probably come up the first week of session, which is January 22nd-ish in there. So just know this topic will be decided upon pretty quickly, or at least the discussion will start pretty early in session. So short-term goals and avenues to achieve them are some of the things we want to talk to you about today, as well as some of those long-term goals and how we might go about that. We're going to start with kind of getting an idea from you all of what's currently working in your systems and what's not, so that we can kind of use that to think what policies and maybe what goes into board rule. Having been here for 3.5 years now, I've learned certain things belong in policy and other things belong in rule, because certain things are really hard to change when you're in policy versus board rule. Board rule is really easy. I can come back every month and change things if I really wanted. Legislation, you have to wait every year to come and bring something back. So we're leaning towards putting some more loose language in legislation and more direct, explicit language in board rule, so that we have the flexibility as you guys interact with what we come up with and say, hey, it'd be nice if this could happen. We'd have the flexibility to change those things. So keep that in mind as you look at policy, what drafts might come out in the next couple of months. There might not be the specificity that you might look for, but that will come out through board rule, just so that we can have that flexibility and you guys can say, hey, this isn't working, and we don't have to wait a year to get it fixed. So what we're going to have you do is work in small groups, and we have 6 sets of posters up around the room to generate ideas of what's working in terms of ELA, elementary literacy in your school districts or charter schools when it comes to the 3 funding pots that we have. So you have K3 reading improvement, you have OEK, and you have early reading software. Okay. And specific, give me specifics about what's working. Don't just say, what was I thinking this morning? Literacy block. Okay, what about your literacy block is working? We have a protected, dedicated time every day. Great. Write that down. Whatever specifics might be coming because you have these funding sources, what's working from having that money in your LEAs, so that we make sure in the new policy that those potential activities are still allowed. For example, a lot of you hire instructional coaches. 96% of K-3 reading improvement funds go to staff. Would you like to continue to do that? If so, put it on what's working so that we continue to support that. There might be other practices that you're like, we don't ever use before and after school time as part of our K-3 money. If we had more money, potentially we would. So don't maybe disregard it, but it may not be working for different reasons. Okay, so those are kind of your three main funding pots. Then we're going to do a little gallery stroll after your 15 minutes, and you have colored dots that I gave you this morning. And you're going to walk around and put a dot next to anything you agree with, whether it's the what's working page or the what's not working, so we can kind of see visually, like, oh, this one's a big one that people agree that this is something that's working out in the field because of these types of programs. Ultimately, what we're looking at is saying, okay, instead of having these three separate funding sources, you'd have one that you would then decide how you want to spend your money based on what strategies work in your LEA. So no longer would you have to buy reading software, or no longer would you have to have OEK. Okay, I'm putting that out there. Most of you like OEK, but I'm just saying you have flexibility in how you would spend those dollars. You'd have options to be able to do all of those things still, but you wouldn't have to be spending those on those kind of earmarked items, because right now there are three separate funding sources. This would combine them into one complete funding source, is ultimately what this conversation will yield in a little bit. So if you'll just find a poster, find a scribe. There are one corner here, one there. You have to shut that door for that corner. And there's one here, one in the back, and then there's another one there. Question, Arlene? Sure. Thank you. Yes. I appreciate you asking questions. OEK is optional extended day kindergarten. So it's called early intervention right now, but it's generally your full day programs or your additional hour programs for kindergarten. Any other questions about those? Yes. Thank you, Becky. Correct. So we're looking at the levy. So her question is, with K3, it has a kind of matching levy component. With the funding ways that we're looking at this, it wouldn't require you to have a match, but most districts would still probably support a match. We are also looking at the possibility of having K3 class size roll up into this literacy block. Class size is 135 million. They are proposing to put it back in the WPU, so it wouldn't be towards K3 anymore anyway, but we would like to see it weaved into this program, so you would have a total, I think it's 167 million to work with across the districts and charters towards literacy. So that's option 4 in our finance proposal, is to steal K3 class size and actually put it into literacy so that you guys would have a lot of funding to really work with, and you might still use it for class size reduction, but you might find other strategies in your LEA that are more effective than only class size reduction. So class size reduction is definitely on the chopping block for WPU. So we're looking to say, let's snag that now and bring it into K3 literacy or elementary literacy, depending on where we go today, as another potential funding source. And if you can imagine what 165,000 instead of 30 million would do, or 165 million would do for you instead of 30 million, I think we have an opportunity here to have some great possibilities. Imagine Mayan, it's 7.6 million in reading software. So, and we manage that at the state right now. Like, you apply, we pay for it, all of that. The money would be going to you to decide if you want software, you could definitely continue with it. If it's working for you, or you have schools or teachers that it's working well, that would be your opportunity to say, that's how we want to spend our money. We'll still run an RFP here of potentials, but you could also pay for different vendors that aren't on the RFP at the state level. Okay, so it's not that any of these programs would go away. It's you deciding as a district or charter, where are we seeing the most return on our investment, and let's put more energy into those areas. Or maybe now that you have flexibility, you might find other ways that you potentially would like to use the funds. Other questions to help you? Suze? So there's a couple of minds of thought right now on the Hill. One is WPU, that the K3 would just wash back into WPU, all of these programs potentially. OEK, one of the potentials for OEK was to I'm trying to remember what it was. There's an option there. Oh, to just add it to the WPU for kindergarten. So the 7.5 million would basically be added to the WPU. So you'd probably get like a 0.60 or a 0.65 WPU for kindergarten rather than the kind of supplemental money. So that's one option for OEK. The conversation on the Hill really seemed to be leaning more towards the literacy block idea of just weaving these funding sources together as one comprehensive opportunity, which is, for me, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's the best potential because it allows you to have cohesiveness. Instead of 3 separate strands, you have one stronger rope all weaved together for you to decide what's the strength in your district around those potential opportunities. Okay, so we want to start with what you think is working so that we don't lose that as we change all of the language in legislation, right? Like if you want to be able to keep paraprofessionals or instructional coaches or other things that you know are working in your system, please put them on the board to make sure we don't lose sight of those because we may be unaware. I mean, Sarah sits and reads your UCA applications painfully for weeks. All right, you all get them rejected because Sarah actually reads them and she gives feedback, right? And so really those opportunities, she's very aware what's going on, but it's going to be nice to just kind of reinforce what you know is working. But we also want to know what's not working in your eyes. What are things that maybe we shouldn't be investing in or shouldn't be putting as options into the legislation? So there's posters, there's pens. If you want your voice to be heard, this is one way today. We'll have another opportunity here in a minute, but this is the kind of the starting way. I will give you kind of a warning when you have like about 2 minutes left with your group, and then you'll get your stickers and you'll go read the other people's groups and put stickers by things that you agree with on either chart. It's going to help us to know how much agreement, because sometimes one person's like, this is working for me. And then the rest of you are like, yeah, well, that's not working for anybody else. And so it just helps us to see the popularity maybe or the commonality across your ideas. So I'm going to have you move. It is 9:20, so at 9:35 we'll be switching, so just so you can gain your time. The reason we're taking so long is we want you to really think so that we don't miss anything in what should be policy, okay, or what maybe goes into board rule. All right, find a space and join some friends. And those of you online, if you want to just take some notes and either email them to Sarah or just put them in the chat box, we'll collect your ideas that way. Take about 30 seconds to kind of finish your last spot if you're not back in your seat yet. I know, you guys don't get to see each other. All right, it looks like most of you are done and making your way back. If you still have a couple, you're more than welcome to wander still. We're going to move on. So even as I look around, and probably as you notice, there are certain things that stand out drastically, but the colored dots just brings it to life. So for example, it looks like coaching for most of you seems to be an effective strategy that you're like, this would be something we would want to be able to still do if this funding kind of changes a little bit. Or OEK seems pretty popular across the charts, paraprofessionals to provide intervention. Software seems to be mixed, like, you know, some of it's working, some of it's not working. But again, this opportunity probably is not to get rid of any of the options. It's more for you to say, where do we want to prioritize our money? Because right now you're kind of dictated to what you have to do. Right now you have to have software. Well, you don't have to, but most people are opting in because it's free to you right now. You have to have OEK if you want that opportunity, right? So you have OEK is kind of forced in that strategy, although it might be an effective strategy. And then K3 literacy kind of has 5 or 6 things that you can do with it currently, the way that things currently stand. In your handouts, you have a little document that looks like this has a table on the bottom that has curriculum, core instruction, intervention, and assessment. Pull that out because that's kind of the sheet I'm going to take you through next. This is part of kind of the work of the proposal of what we are anticipating. I'm going to hit the highlights. We're going to get into some conversation with each other to give Sarah and I feedback on really what you want. These are just our initial raw thoughts. A lot of it comes from many meetings with you. I mean, I've been here 3 years, and you've said things over time that I was like, I wish we could change that. Or, oh, yep, that's a great idea. This is the opportunity to actually take all that feedback you've given for the past few years and make that opportunity. So starting with the potential of the cohesive literacy block, the funding will still be targeted towards early literacy. Okay, that is not the opportunity to change. We're not saying, let's just put this in elementary schools. It is still going to be a focused literacy intervention. Now, one thing to keep in mind is OEK does literacy and numeracy. We would want to keep that opportunity in there. So we would put a little line in policy that says in kindergarten, you may also use it for numeracy, okay, to kind of not lose the power of OEK and still allow you to serve. But if we did numeracy in all the grades, it gets too dissipated too quickly. It's just not a big enough source. Okay, so you've got K3 reading improvement, which is currently $15 million. This has declined since its inception by about $7 a kid. Okay, so every year it gets a little bit less if you've kind of watched your K3 come in due to just growth of charter schools is some of the impact, as well as your population numbers changing over time. Okay, but as we add more schools, it gets kind of broken up. Early intervention is that $7.5 million that goes towards OEK. So it's called early intervention in the bills at this point, but that's your full day or your extended hours kindergarten opportunities. Then the early reading software is your $7.6 million. That's been going on for the last couple of years. That's dedicated towards those 7 providers that we currently have on contract. The last one, and this just came up, Kathleen Reby, who's on our school board, she was like, what about the K3 class size reduction? And I didn't even know that was a potential, so we were like, sure. Now, I have $122 million up here. It's actually $135 million. So looking at an opportunity to take something that's probably going to get rolled up in the WPU, instead of being 50% of this right now, goes to K3 for class size reduction. So if it gets rolled up in the WPU, it will no longer be focused on K3, 50% of it. And this is really this is what we're considering option 4, to include this as a potential to weave into the literacy block grant, which would significantly increase the amount of dollars you would have towards literacy. Okay. You could still use it for class size reduction. Having 35 kindergartners in a class is not a happy space, but also taking a teacher from 20 to 12 and not giving them the skills of how to teach differently doesn't really help. I mean, class size reduction is not an effective strategy when you don't change how you teach. So if this does come out and we leave class size as an opportunity, we were thinking about you probably have to give some professional learning to your teachers of how to use a reduced class size effectively. Because what we're seeing in the data is class size reduction doesn't work because teachers don't change how they teach. I teach the same way I taught 29 as I do 12. And we've got to help them understand how you teach differently when you have such a small group. So those are kind of the 4 funding sources we're looking at. If the top 3, which are a couple of the options, only make it in, it's still 30.1. So although it's not doubling what you currently have, because currently you get 15 just for literacy, you would weave in the OEK and you would weave in software. Software currently comes to the state level. This would come to the local level instead. Okay, so you'd be enhancing that. How we see it is for opportunity and bringing the literacy block together is that it increases your flexibility on how to expend your early intervention dollars. So they're still targeted towards literacy, but you get to decide instead of it has to be OEK or it has to be software or it has to be this opportunity, you can say we now have this bigger pot to say we still want to do X and Y, but we're going to drop off Z. Right? Or you're going to add something to your components that you haven't been able to do. So that weaving allows you to really keep focused work around early intervention and supporting students in their literacy development with just combining those funding sources. Potentially, this is something we want you to weigh in on today, is expanding it to be elementary. So that the focus for accountability will still be that 3rd grade reader option, and we're going to expand it a little bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we've heard from you over the years that it'd be nice if K5 or K6, your elementary setting, could benefit from, for say, your coaches giving professional learning to 3rd grade teachers. Why can't 4, 5, and 6 be in the room, right? So some of those opportunities that you're already doing because you just know what's best, but legally is not allowed, this would allow some flexibility in that opportunity. So we definitely want you to weigh on that eventually, but we know we have like last year, 27% of your kids aren't reading at grade level going into 4th grade, yet there's no funding to support them in getting the intervention they need. At least state funding, you have your local ways. So it would reduce inefficiency. So right now you have a K-3 reading report in UCA, you have an early intervention report in UCA, you have to apply for early reading software. There's a lot of paperwork that goes along with these funding sources. This would turn it into one comprehensive report. So you would have less reporting coming out of these systems. And then the last one, I really just see this as kind of bringing this disconnected strategies that they ask us, well, is OEK working or is K-3 literacy? And I'm like, well, the kids get both, so I'm not sure which strategy is necessarily working. We can say if the kid got OEK versus kids who didn't, we can tell you how that's working. But they're like, well, what about the interplay of K-3? I'm like, well, that's nothing I can say. Well, this kid didn't get K-3 sources, and this kid did. We just don't track it that way. So it would really give you guys the opportunity to come up with one coherent system within your LEA to say, what are the strategies we see that are working, and to really maximize your investment in those strategies. So potentially taking in many options. Let me give you the funding options that are going to be proposed on Friday. Option 1, roll it all into the WPU. That is what we've been asked for in all of those programs from the legislature. They said, what does that look like if we roll up OEK, early reading software, and K-3 literacy? Okay, that came out of the meeting. I met with Jamie yesterday. She has a list of 10 programs, and the 3 of them are up. 3 of our programs are up there. Okay, so those are all things the legislature is asking us to report on. What is that? What's the outcome of doing that? More from a money perspective, not so much from a program perspective. They're like, well, if this goes into WPU, instead of being focused on kindergarten for OEK, it goes to K-12, right? That's what a WPU would do. So potential ways to use the funding. These are the things that Sarah and I and some others in the agency have kind of just milled through and talked about what are some things that could potentially this money be used for. If it's not on this list, we need to get it on the list today, because this is going to be the list that we help to build kind of the legislative language around. So we need your help in what that looks like. So starting with the far left column, curriculum. Curriculum, basically, we would provide that you could buy core instruction or intervention materials if they align with one of these kind of key literacy areas. The one that's missing on your sheet is writing. So we're going to be adding writing, anything related to writing, which would be spelling, that kind of realm of things, okay? So PA, phonics, vocabulary, oral language, fluency, comprehension, writing, and anything kind of related in there. Basically the big 5 plus oral language and writing, okay? Anything in there that would give you the opportunity to buy intervention materials or core instruction materials that you need for your system to kind of support students. It would also allow for the interactive software that you've been purchasing already through us. You could potentially still be doing that work with these dollars, okay? Then the core instruction component. Currently, what it seems to be is that a lot of you have instructional coaching that goes on for the core instruction component, where you're helping your teachers in the classrooms be more effective. So that piece is still there. Then you have professional learning, the opportunity to use those dollars to provide professional development to your teachers, your paras, whoever needs that kind of professional development. But it would need to be data-driven, data-informed. Like, you're not just doing PD for the sake of PD, but you're using the data to say, hey, here's our need, here's the PD we're going to give to meet that need. And aligned to the PL standards. So the state has professional learning standards that are required for all of your professional learning. So we would just make that connection again. There's 8 standards. If you're not familiar with them, you might want to look them over. The next one, what we're thinking for legislation is saying there will be a minimum number of minutes required. We're not going to put the number of minutes in the legislation, although I have 90 right there. We would put that in board rule. So we would have more conversations with all of you later. Half-day kindergarten is different than what a full-day kindergarten demand might be. And where's that happy place where we don't force you to a higher number, but we have schools at 55 minutes for core instruction? That's not okay. I'm sorry. It's not going to work anymore. So we want to set kind of a minimum level of expectation that hopefully many of you would exceed, but we also look at our data and say schools at 120 minutes outperform schools below that. So like, we have some data to suggest where we need to be, but there's always been this research around the 90 minutes or more, right? So trying to think about that, but in legislation it would probably just be the board will set recommendations for a minimum number of minutes, and not actually put any minutes in legislation, so that as we mandate that, you can be like, this is not, working, and we can go back and revise, and we can change and adapt. Obviously, core instruction, what you do would be aligned to the core standards, and then we would promote any strategies that you have around whole and small group differentiation. We have a lot of misconceptions out with teachers that they think this is intervention. Differentiation is not intervention, as you know, but our teachers think it is. They're like, well, I meet with each group and we read books. That's great, but that means everybody's getting the same thing, right? We read a different level of book. Does not make it different, right? It's differentiation, not intervention. And then class size reduction, if we get those funds in there, that you would still be able to use those funds for those opportunities as potential. Obviously, probably not your number one strategy because it has not yielded much effect size in our state to have class size reduced, but you sure have people who know how to do this well, and 35 kindergartners is not appropriate in my mind. And so there would be your opportunities to say, maybe we want to keep some out there to make sure our class sizes can stay reasonable. Moving to the intervention column, staffing-wise, you'd have anybody who needs to provide intervention support. So that could be paraprofessionals, it could be coaches, it could be reading specialists, whatever that looks like. So just general intervention support staff. Professional learning, again, you probably need to provide professional learning to your peers on how to use the intervention materials you have, that kind of thing. Extended learning time, basically what we did is we took most of what was already in legislation and then added a few things that we thought should be added. So extended learning time, this is already allowed, extended day kindergarten, before or after school programming. So you could continue to have money for that as you see fit. You don't have to do these things either. Some of this is just like, you can use these for these options. Doesn't mean you have to have before and after school programming, but you could if you wanted to use that strategy. The next one, though, this would be some new stuff. So LEA, not really new, but seems new to some people. LEAs are required to provide interventions to remediate student-specific diagnosed reading skill deficiencies. So at this time, federal and state law requires that you provide intervention to kids who show deficiencies. This is not happening for all students, and we know that because you mark yes and no, and kids who should be receiving intervention are not, and kids who shouldn't be receiving intervention sometimes are. So really looking at what are their skill deficiencies, and diagnosed mean there'd be some diagnostic assessment data you would use to say, here's where we're going to, intervene on. A lot of you are already doing that work, but we want to really put that clearly in the language. Next one, interventions must have sufficient intensity, duration, urgency, and frequency. So when you're looking at students who are fourth graders who read like first graders, their intervention is going to look differently than a fourth grader who reads like a third grader, right? So we'd have some kind of differences there. This would probably be pretty vague in legislation and more defined in board rule so that we can learn and adapt and change as necessary. The next one, targeted interventions guided by data. From diagnostic, progress monitoring, and observational assessments focused on students' area of need. This is something, as you guys probably are aware of, we've kind of harped on this the last few years. We have kids getting intervention in things that aren't necessarily their area of need. So they are identified with a fluency deficit due to dibbles, but it's honestly a phonics skill deficit, but we're giving a fluency intervention. So really aligning the intervention to their need and helping with resources and materials and possibly recommended interventions. I don't think we'll ever dictate what interventions you have to have, but giving you a list. Like if you have kids in this area, in these grade levels, here are some tools that we know are effective. But it wouldn't be mandated that you would use those materials because we're local control and you can make those decisions. But at least a resource to say, here's some good ones. And then the bottom one there is delivered in small group format by a trained professional. So the people have been trained in some way, and it's in a small group setting. I was in a school that said they had small groups of 12. That is not a small group. Sorry to break it to you. That's not, research would say that's probably not as effective as maybe a group of 5 or 6. So really thinking about that small group format. And maybe we have to define what small group is in board rule. If we're going to have people think small group is 12, we can go there. The last one is assessments. If we're going to identify kids' area of need, some of you might need to spend some money on diagnostic tools. Some of you might need to buy Dibbles Deep to figure out where is the skill gap so we can provide the correct intervention. Or you might want an interactive software tool for that. Whatever you choose, you might need some opportunities to invest in your assessments. Progress monitoring tools might be, and then adaptive softwares. This would allow for Dibbles 4 through 6, right? If you wanted to purchase that, we could go there and we can have that conversation and see if we need to go there as a state in a different place. I saw that on one of your guys' sheets. So it doesn't necessarily have to come out of your funding, but maybe we just up the funding that's going into K3 Dibbles and ask for more to expand to 4-6. if it doesn't happen, you could at least still do that if you wanted to kind of have the funding from the state to provide that. So those are where we're currently considering what might be going into legislation to support the work that's currently being done and to put a little more guardrails around the effectiveness of what's being done, because our data is getting worse, as I've shown you. It's not getting better, and we think some of these new pieces could help with that, really finding interventions that match kids' needs due to their skill deficits. All right, so thinking about that, we have a little, maybe it's not working now. Oh, there it goes. I'm going to stop there for a second. We're going to have you get into groups, and I have a little paper that looks like what you see on the screen. And I want you to think, this is your feedback form to us, because I can't sit and listen to all of you. I would love to. Like, if I could just have focus groups with 4 of you at a time, I would. But because we're on such a short time frame, we can't. So we're going to give you a tool to kind of give us feedback that we can take and summarize. So literacy block opportunity potential. We want you to start with the additional benefits, things that we didn't outline for you. What are potentially some benefits to going into one big literacy block grant, okay? Beyond flexibility, reducing inefficiencies, that kind of thing. Basically the list I have on your sheet, okay? The next one would be potential issues. So what are we not seeing as if we were to do this? And I'm going to tell you, they listed the 3 programs as potential WP roll-ups, okay? So that, to me, I'd rather us pull them all in and keep them than to worry that we might lose any of the programs to not even having the funding for literacy. The November 1st meeting was the scariest because they were like, why do we need this? School districts can decide if literacy is important. And I was like, we're a state. I don't think there's any state that says literacy is not a priority. But maybe Utah will be the first. So I'm hoping we won't end up in that space. It is still potential. It is still one of the options we will recommend to the board. Not really recommend, but we have to describe what it would look like. But what are the potential issues? So one of the things we've seen with K-3 is the dollar per student that you get every year is declining over time. One of the ways to mitigate that would be to put growth into this. So concurrent enrollment, for example, has a 4% growth metric to it every single year. We don't come and ask for it. It's just automatic. We probably need something similar to K-3 so that we don't see this bump at first and then this decline over time. So that might be something to kind of think about. Then looking at the columns that we've represented, either issues you have with what we have there or things you think that need to be added. So you might disagree with a potential bullet item. Feel free to put that disagreement in notes. Or you might say you forgot to add this critical component. Or we would also like the flexibility to do this. This is your opportunity to kind of lay out anything we may have overlooked. Okay? Questions about what your task is going to be. You're probably going to have to work in groups of 4 to 6 because I only have 20 sheets. We wanted to keep you not in, but we want you to engage. This is your opportunity to give us feedback. And then what I'll do, and Sarah will kind of take your ideas, we'll reformat those, bring in those ideas, and then we'll resend it out to you so you can kind of see your thoughts and ideas added to this kind of framework. Because this will be very similar to what we'll share with the board and what we would kind of recommend if we went to this literacy block idea. Yes. So board or legislature, just so I can clarify, or do you want to know both? Okay. So her question is like, what's the likelihood of some of this happening? Like, where is kind of the leaning? The WPU, because of I think, hearing from so many superintendents, I don't think will be the likelihood at this point, at least for K-3 literacy. I can't guarantee that on OEK or early reading because it didn't come out that way initially. That's been a kind of a recent development. And so people aren't aware that that's potentially a potential. So from a legislative standpoint, they are really looking at putting a lot of stuff back in the WPU. They want to give the flexibility back to the LEA to say, you choose. If literacy is important, you choose to do that. But we're not going to force you to do that. Which in my space, I'm the literacy person. I'm like, oh gosh, that's not a good idea. But maybe you're like, well, yeah, we can prioritize it. Cash's superintendent was there at the meeting, and he's like, I would love to say I could, but there are so many people pulling at those dollars, it may not happen. right? And they're like, well, that's your fault then. And so it was kind of a nasty little situation, but it is what it is. So it's true. I mean, you want to say you would all prioritize literacy, but there are so many demands that come at your superintendent. The likelihood that that would happen is not necessarily guaranteed, right? We'd all want to say, yeah, of course we're going to keep doing this, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. So you're going to think you might get less. So one of the things that our office is doing as part of this, if we were to roll it into the WPU, what does that mean? Cost differentials, impact to the LEAs, so that it's not just like, yep, this is how the money would go, but they can kind of see the negatives and positives, like, well, this district would get 20,000 more and this district would lose 50, that kind of thing. So they'll get to see at the local level how the impact would happen as part of the conversation. I felt like at the last meeting on the 15th that they were leaning more towards this literacy block idea. The governor is supportive of this idea, and so there's a little bit more, I think, support around this. Yeah, so Tammy is very excited about this opportunity because it gives you guys ultimate flexibility, right? Like you don't have to spend it on anything other than literacy as kind of your oversight pool, but you can choose if you want to invest in certain strategies that we've been kind of forced to choose at this time. Yeah, there's no like incoming dollars in the elementary schools. Well, what we're going to eventually, just so you know what your role in this is, you have to be a voice once we come out and start moving. It can't be USB calling for this. Like it's going to have to be your literacy folks. It's going to have to be superintendents. And then we're going to start engaging with, organizations like United Way, Sutherland Institute, Voices for Utah Children. Like I have a list of people we're going to meet with to help get them on our side so that legislators are hearing from multiple voices the same message. Because if we have some people saying, and this is where the superintendents have had this kind of conversation before, you may not love everything that comes out of this, but if we have a couple voices not wanting it, that can kill the whole thing for everybody. And you might think, well, if we just could make this one change, then I could be happy with it. That may be enough to kill it. So we have to kind of get to the point where you may not be 100% happy with what totally ends up, but you're good enough that you're like, well, this is better than what we have. So just keep that in mind. One of the potential things I think is going to come up is our tech vendors have a lot of power. They have a lot of legislative support, and I anticipate if we do get a literacy block grant, that a percentage of the money will have to be spent on software. I don't know if we're going to be able to get around it. I have enough data to say it's not working to force a percentage, not saying you couldn't decide we want software, but to force a percentage that you have to buy it. We have enough data now after 3 years of collection that I'll show you in a little bit, that it's not working effectively as a universal strategy, right? So some of you are like, we have a tool that's working, we have a strategy that's working, great. We'll still leave that software component in there, but to have a dedicated amount to software, that kind of limits the potential of what strategies you might use. So software may be a strategy for you, but it may not be for another district. Yes. So fidelity in general is going to get loosened up quite a bit. Basically, the goal this year at the legislature is, if with the early reading, if we do it, is to take the fidelity and put it to the board to make those decisions, and the board wants to give local control to that decision. So you guys would decide what fidelity means in your district. So that part will change significantly anyway if early reading software does not get rolled in or it ends up being its own, because fidelity has been a significant issue, and some people are having better success with different minutes or whatever, so they want to leave it up to a local control decision, which would significantly change what software kind of looks like now. But if you look at the data that we'll look at later, if kids don't use it for the amount of minutes that's required, you don't get the results. So there is kind of that double-edged sword. Let's go ahead and have you get in groups. Just turn and talk to the people behind or in front of you and kind of make groups of 4 to 6, and I will bring by a template for you to kind of talk. And if you have disagreement, you can mark, we disagree on this, but it's still on the sheet. There's only one sheet per group, all right? All right, it looks like your conversations are are dissipating into like more commentary. So I'm going to give you 1 minute. We're going to wrap them up, and then we'll come back and talk about accountability changes for this. All right, come on back in 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. If you have more thoughts and you're like, they didn't get down on that paper, steal the paper and write them down. That's fine. Okay, so those are just one way of us getting your feedback. The next thing that I want to take you through is our proposed changes to accountability. With this opportunity, we have been at a low level of accountability for a couple of years now because of the way legislation is written that you lose your money in 2 years. Okay, we would like to change accountability to be a little more rigorous. Okay, I'm going to put that out there just to frame this conversation. Within that, though, we would have a different structure for if you failed. Okay, so just know like the potential there is different than the 2 years and you're out type system. We're about support, not about taking your money away. So you would see increased support from the state level to help you get back up to where you need to be. So currently is on the left side. With currently how we do K-3 accountability is third grade only. You have your pathways of progress, and you need 47.83% of your students to make typical or better progress, right? That's your UGG. If you make that, you're good. If you don't, then we put you on probation and we support you, and hopefully you make it year 2. At this point, we only had 2 this year not make it. Okay, our state average is 68%. Okay, very significantly higher than our goal. Senator Milner is one of the legislators we'll probably see get behind supporting this bill as the sponsor, and she teared up when she heard the percentage. So I'm pretty sure that percentage is not going to remain, okay? So we went and looked at the data and said, okay, if we change that target, how many LEAs would fail, how many would need support, that kind of thing, okay? The other thing I've heard from you in the past few years is we wish not only third grade was accountable. We'd like to see, and maybe I've gotten this wrong, we'd like to see first and second grade have some meat in this game. I talked about this with the superintendents on Tuesday. The week has been long. Tuesday, and told them one of the reasons for why I might advocate for this, but I said I need to talk to the LDs first. One of them is our teachers, our poorest functioning teachers are often being filtered in the first and second grade because there is no accountability. Your accountability is 3 and up. So your principals, rightfully so, are like, okay, if that's where I'm accountable, I'm going to put my strong teachers up there. But that is building the problem that we have right now. Okay, that's one of my perceptions. You can yell at me later, okay? So our proposed change would be 1 through 3, aggregate group. Okay, so the percentage of students in grades 1 through 3 making typical or better progress. It wouldn't be like your first, second, and third. It would be first and third thrown all together. Okay, all of them would be part of your accountability measure. Still pathways, the target would increase. When we started looking at if we put it at 60 or 61 or 65 or whatever, it increased not drastically, but we were up to like 37 LEAs that would fail by 65%, okay? So we won't go to that level. 1, we can't support that many of you, and 2, that tells us that a little too high of a goal. So we're going to run some more data to determine what might be a happy place, and then we would share with you what that might look like. At 61%, I want to say it was like, I think it's 17, it was like 4 LEAs and 13 charter schools. Charter schools will always be more impacted, but what we have to look at is that was third grade only. If you're now getting a bigger N size and you're able to take more grade levels, it should benefit charters and not being hit as heavy because you have 19 kids in third grade, but now you're taking into account like the 70 you have in grades 1 through 3. So it makes, and we'd still have the confidence interval and all of those components. So in terms of where this might land, we don't know yet until we run the data. And we would run that back through you to say, here's what it looks like. Where's the best place to set the goal? If we were to set it at these different targets, looking at potentially who would fail, what does that look like? Yes, Earl. Or, not Earl. A much larger funding source, right? So your potential of loss is greater because it is a greater funding source for sure. The support mechanisms that we are thinking through, we're trying to come up with like a tiered system of support almost. Like if you fail the first year, here's kind of the levels of supports you would get from USBE. And we're going to ask for additional staff that would actually support you out in your LEAs for that work. Tier 2 would be you just continue on with what we did in Tier 1, but we would add on some additional leadership opportunities for your principals to really look at how do you lead literacy in a building with a principal, 2 teacher leaders, a coach, probably the supervising principal involved in that leadership institute to really focus their work around literacy. And we would pick the schools in your LEA that needed to improve, not all of them. Some of your schools are doing fine. And then you have other schools that really could use the literacy knowledge to know how to move their building. So we've come up with some general parameters. We're not going to get into the if you fail experience yet, but just know it would be multiple years and we would never be actually out. You would just start, the superintendency wanted to see us have you match some of the funds. So there would be a certain percentage after so many years of failure that you would actually, we would reduce, like maybe it'd be 80% would be paid by the state and you would have to bring in the extra 20. So you would actually be paying in to kind of put a little more push to the districts to do something after so many years of failure. So we'll release that plan with all of you. Well, not all of you, but we're going to have that literacy collaborative group to help weigh in on that. If you want to participate, I'll ask you about that in a minute. But we will be doing a lot more work around the accountability procedures and then the if you fail type scenarios. Like what are the supports that would be most helpful at those different levels? Because often our first year fails, get out. We have not had anyone fail 2 years in a row. With the support or just that kind of inherent focus that comes with failure, it seems to be sufficient to kind of move people. We anticipate with the supports we would give would even help even more with some of the things we talk through. So we had the agency kind of come together across departments and talk about what could be those tiered systems of support, and we came up with some good solutions that I think we'll have a smaller group of you weigh in on because that part does not need to be defined right now. We need certain parts defined as we move forward. So what I want to do is just give you a couple minutes to talk about this. If you see another option, you're more than welcome to use your notes that you have and just write on the back how else you might see accountability being done. The reasons we went this way is, one, you have told me for years, third grade's not enough. We need to bring the accountability down. We're not in a place to bring it to kindergarten. We're just not there. So I'm not going to put that out there, but we are in a place that first, second, and third matters. Our state data says if you're not on target by the end of first grade, you are not going to read. You have like a 2% chance to be on grade level. We have to do something differently in those earlier grades. We can't leave it to third grade to be the determiner of accountability. And the nice thing is it does increase the number of students in your population set, helps to bring everybody on terms of reading is important in the early years, that kind of thing. But there might be some downfalls that we haven't considered with this. The target is going to be the issue. We have to make the target manageable at the USBE level of support. Like we can't have 34 LEAs fail the first year. We don't have that many people that have the skills to go and help your LEA to do that work. Yes. Oh, that's a great question on all of this. This will not go into place next year. If any of this happens, it'll be 2019-20, which would give you a year of planning. that is one of the points of this, is that you just don't change it next year and whoop, now we're doing this. But you have a year of planning to think, how is this going to impact us and what are the strategies we want to use? So you would have a full year after this legislative session going into the 2019-20 school year. So you would not have, K-3 will remain the same next school year. But this will help, like your staffing stuff might change. You might have some decisions that is going to impact a lot, and you need time to do that. So none of this goes into effect for next year. Thank you for asking that, Bonnie. That's very important for people to know. All right, let me have you talk for just a couple minutes around this idea. If you have a different idea, please record it on the back of your sheet, and we can look at those. And if you want to put your name by it, that might be helpful if you want us to reach out so we could get clarity, because it may not make sense. It may make sense to you guys as you're talking, but we'll look at it and go, not sure what that means. We can reach out to you, okay? All right, 2 minutes, and then we'll come back. Vaughn, we need these sheets, so make sure you get it to me or Sarah. Otherwise, your feedback doesn't exist, right? So make sure if you have any ideas for us, you get those to us. Retention, basically? Can I pretend? Oh, for students. No, you got to put in. We don't. Research would suggest not a good idea. All right, let's go ahead and come on back. I'm going to shut this door. I always feel like we're having private conversations, and then I remember they're recorded and posted online. Like, they're not that private. But I haven't gotten in too much trouble yet. So, all right. I wish we had time to converse around this. We just don't as a group. I will be pulling a smaller group to kind of do some more work as we keep moving forward. Right now, these are the people that had signed up last time when we started thinking we're going to do this kind of pre-K-12 comprehensive literacy plan. We want some people involved. If your name's on the right, you're already on my list to be contacted to kind of do some work. And part of the initial work will really be this, legislation and board rule around these ideas. If you're not up there and you are interested, just drop me an email and I'll add you to my list. Okay, it might be a big group. We'll just break out into working groups around particular issues. I'd rather have more voices than less, so I'm not going to limit the group size if you're interested in joining. So the Literacy Improvement Initiative, the main goal is to create a 3 to 5 year plan of how we're going to improve literacy, which is going to include short and long-term outcomes and goals of what we expect. Okay. Right now, that's kind of sidelined because we've got to handle this legislation thing because that will impact the 3 to 5 year plan, right? Like if we have a plan that doesn't quite line, it'll change. If we don't have any literacy funds, that should be fun too. So like it really depends on where this all lands, what that might look like. The initial work of the group right now will be getting the legislation right and getting the board rule as we kind of work through those components. I'd expect legislation will pass in March. Board rules will probably come hopefully passing by August so that you guys have the full year to think, how is that going to impact the work that we do, okay? Time commitment, the first meeting, I'm probably going to need an earlier meeting than that, but I really don't know if I have any days on my calendar to do it, will be the January 16th, and it will just follow the LD meeting. I'm going to try and tag them on when I can. I know some of you might be secondary as well, so if that becomes too many of you, then we'll change dates. But when I looked at this list, most of you are just elementary, so it made sense to just kind of tag it on to that day, especially some of you that travel in. But again, if you want to join and you want to have more of a active voice in the conversation, that's great. Whatever we kind of come up with, I will send most likely just through communication via email. Like, I'm not going to leave you in the dark. Hopefully you'll feel like you're part of the process. You're like, I get too many emails from Jennifer. Hopefully we won't get to that point, but that you feel like, oh, that part changed. Like accountability, when we make some determinations on that, we'll send that information out and kind of get your voices weighing in on that conversation. Okay, thinking about meeting every 3 weeks for 3 hours. This will potentially have different meetings for the hot legislative moments that will definitely come up during the session. But this is the group that's currently, but ultimately this group is turning into that 3 to 5 year plan group. We're going to put out like a state initiative literacy plan that the state will kind of be, that will be our work, but that will be what you guys will work. Like that will be where dollars are invested from our state level. I mean, Superintendent Dixon stopped me in the hallway. She's like, what kind of money do you need to improve literacy? I was like, let's figure out what the problems are, and then I will come to you for money. So this will be really strategizing, where do we need supports? Where do we need resources so that we can move the system? Okay, so if you're not on that list and want to be, feel free to reach out. Sarah's going to take over. We are moving on from this conversation. You're welcome to talk to us at another time, but we could be here all day. So, all right. And if the slide on here doesn't advance to the right one, Just text Jerry and he'll fix it.
All right. Hello, everyone. So hopefully, if you remember our first meeting, which seems like it was a really long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago, but we presented to you this document about the 4 elements of effective literacy instruction, and we talked about how the reason that it all came about is because of the the project that I did last year on the schools that were making the most growth and what they were doing, and some of those pieces that they were all doing, and some of the pieces that we put then into this rubric, as well as the survey. So we took your feedback last time. We made those changes. So what we want you to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes to read it on your own. After that, then I want you to get into small groups. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes to kind of just discuss if you think anything further needs to be changed, or maybe some of you were like, I see someone made this change and, well, I just don't agree with it. That's fine too. Just let us know. This is hopefully our final round of revision. And then what I will do is I will come around and give you this handout that has all of the same information, but it gives you some space to write on so that your small group can actually give us feedback and we can collect it to make those revisions. So again, 5 minutes on your own to kind of look through it. I know it's kind of a lot, and it could be wording. And honestly, if you see spelling mistakes, we apologize in advance. We were trying to do this fast and furious because that's our whole theme this year. So with that 5 minutes, and then after that, I'll pull you together in small groups, and we'll give you some time to provide feedback in that manner, and then we'll take your feedback and have some whole group sharing. All right. So please form small groups. I'll come around and give you the sheet so you can give us your feedback. Again, we're going to have about 10 minutes for you to fill out this sheet with your group, and if we need less, then that's fine too. So however much time you need, but go ahead and fill it out with your group. And it can be the same group, or if you feel like you've been sitting for too long, you're welcome to get up and join a new group. Does anyone need more time? Just kindly give me a amount of fingers, nice fingers, please, if you could. Appropriate fingers. Anyone? Okay, so finish your little note-taking device if you have any notes. If you don't, that's fine too. If you think it's perfect, although I don't know if I'd say that. We did it quickly, like I said. So before I gather those, what I really want to do is kind of pull out whole group, because that might make you think of some things that you want to add to your small group, but we're only going to take about 5 minutes to do that. So is there any group that really there was something that they feel like the entire group needs to discuss in this piece before you can hand in your small group forms that you really feel like needs to come up for the whole group? Well, share it out. Here, actually, I'm going to bring you the microphone so that our friends that are in online land can join.
All right.
Okay. We were really concerned that if this is a self-assessment, many people think they're doing these and would check it all off. We do that. So maybe adding an evidence column might be appropriate. So they have to provide some kind of evidence, because many of those people that think they're doing all those, their other scores are in the toilet. And anyway.
In that evidence column, it could maybe give examples, or another column, what this actually means. You might see this or do this or whatever. And I was just curious, on the engaging instructions, effective instruction, there's nothing mentioned about the instructions being based on the standards. Later, there's something about the materials being based on the standards. And I didn't know if that changed what information you got from those schools who were high performing or not.
The orange part, right? Or the blue part?
Blue part.
Oh, it's in instructional materials, and then it says tasks are aligned with the content area standards.
But it's not in the effective, or is that all one section, Sarah?
Yep, the blue is all, well, it's 2 sections. It's instructional materials and effective instruction. So the materials are aligned. Yes, correct. Yep. Hey, we had to make the font really small to fit on 2 pages, guys. Anyone else? Okay.
Maybe if you just drug that dark blue over to that would. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. It lost. Oh, thanks, Bonnie. We lost the dark blue. I'll make that note too. All right. So, Jen, when you have a moment, would you mind going around picking up those forms? Oh, one moment, please. All right, so coming back together. Is this on? Yeah. Thinking about state rostering, everyone's favorite subject. I know you're so excited. So with everyone's favorite subject, hopefully you'll notice on the back table, and I know the vast majority of you are Amplifi users, so this would be really helpful for you. For the DMG users, we'll talk a little bit about that, but hopefully you've noticed that between Amplifi and the USBE, we worked for 2 months now trying to create a document so that would be more helpful for you and answer more questions, so that it's things that you can fix on your own and not have to wait for one of us to call you back. So we're trying to make it faster and more efficient for you all. So kind of what we're going to start with is the testing window. So as you all know, tomorrow, December 1, the testing window opens for middle of year. Everyone's super excited. And then it goes until January 31st. So I know normally some of you are thinking, but usually in December UTrex goes down. IT has assured me twice now, because I double checked because I just get nervous, twice now that UTrex will remain up during December during the testing window. So we are hoping for really good things there. But just wanted you to, I know some of you maybe have already thought of that and were worried, but I wanted you to know we did think of that a few months ago, and we're remedying that before it happened. So we are trying to prevent those issues. The next piece is the Dmg Uploads. So if you are a Dmg customer, and by Dmg, in case it's the Dibbles Net. So if you're Dibbles Net, not Next, we're all Dibbles Next users, right? Because that's a test, but Dibbles Net users. Emily Berry runs the Dmg Weekly Uploads currently, but since the testing window is opening, she's going to try to do that daily. So just kind of for you to know that it is going to be run daily during the testing window, and then we're going to try to have it automated so that she doesn't have to do it every single day for all 21 LEAs. So we're working on that as well. And then the Amplifi Updates. So the students that moved out, you'll notice on the 22nd, I believe it was, of this month, Amplifi actually took those kids out, so they should have been removed. And we're going to try to do that monthly until, again, we can get that automated. So just so you're kind of aware of that, we are trying to deal with that as well. We know that that can be frustrating to some teachers, it sounds like. And please know that that's just a soft delete. So just because it's deleted, if they, for whatever reason, move back into your LEA next month, it will show up and the data will show up with them. So I don't want you to think that it's gone forever. It's not. Everything in Amplifi is a soft delete, so it's never really gone. So just kind of so you're aware of that. And then, like I said, they're going to try to automate that to at least happen weekly. But right now they're going to keep doing it once a month just until we can get that set up. It does take some time. And then the state rostering document, this FAQ sheet is what I'm sort of calling it, but it is for troubleshooting. And honestly, I want you to share it widely. Share it with IT, share it with your SIS person, whoever that is, your UTrex people. Share it with everyone that has anything to do with your rostering, because that will be really helpful for them, because depending on your role in that, some of these might not be helpful to you. They may be helpful to the UTrex person. Question. It is in the Google folder. Did you get access to that? I should ask that. Okay, if you didn't, please let us know. We'd be happy to get that out for you. And then as far as looking at this, what I wanted to do is we have I'm so happy, by the way, that we have such a large group today, but we have a larger group than I expected. So what I want to do is, if we can somehow get together in about 8 groups, which is only like 1 or 2 more than we have been getting in. And what I'm going to do is give you a question that you're going to troubleshoot using that document. So whatever question your group has, you're going to find that in the document and figure out how to troubleshoot and then share it with the group. The reason I chose these is because they're the ones that I get most often. So obviously, if they're in the document, we've gotten them enough, but these are like the top 8. So I'm going to come around and give your group one question, and I want you to spend some time working on it as a group and figure out what the response is, and then you're going to share it with the group. All right, anybody need more time? No? Okay, so each question that you got actually had a number on it. Who has question number 1? If your group could just raise your hand. Group number 1, please read your question and then the response that you found. And if you could even share what page it's on, that would be great.
I'm saying Adam is fresh. I'm saying that for everyone to hear. We had number 1, thank you. Who does what for enrollment on grades K3 and Amplifi? How many of you know the answer? Because it's right on the first page. So you'll see under enrollment, who does what for enrollment of grades K through 3 and Amplifi, and they are listed and bulleted for you right there.
Thank you. Who has number 2? Oh, excellent.
So question 2 is, what are the steps needed to verify information on page 3? So it would be on page 3 in your document under troubleshooting.
I thought that would be trickier, so I tried to give you some.
So basically, it's check everything on your end through Utrex and check for teacher cactus IDs before you contact the state.
Thank you. And so that kind of the verify information on page 3 kind of came from Emily Berry because I don't have access to Utrex, so I can't fix any of that, which is fun. But she can't fix it either if it's an LEA problem. So she's saying if you can check these things and these are all okay, then it's something that we can fix. But if it's a problem prior to then we can't. So we're trying to just make it quicker for you in those kind of ways. And then who has number 3?
What if I don't see a class or a student in M-Class Home? The answer is on page 4, where it says, what if I don't see a class or a student in M-Class Home? It's a very technical answer, so I would refer you to that question and answer.
Yes. And the biggest reminder I want to mention there is that it can take up to 72 hours for the classes to be loading. Most of them aren't 72 hours. It sort of depends on the LEA and how often and all of that, when their Utrex time loads and what time it is versus our load. And so we just kind of wanted to give you that as well, because sometimes people call and be like, this kid didn't show up. And I'm like, when did it happen? 8 hours ago. Okay, we're going to need more time than that. They'll probably show up. So who has number 4?
Okay, the question is, why do I have students assigned to multiple classes for the same grade and same teacher? The answer is found on page 6 in the middle, and basically the core code must be selected to distinguish between the student's homeroom and other content classes. And then at the end it says it's mainly impacts 3rd grade.
Yes. And one thing I want to bring up that's not in there that we just found out recently is some SIS systems, I guess, automatically at the end of a term change the core code, which then causes a whole mess of issues for you. Might want to check into that with your SIS system, because I know we've got like a million different SIS systems in our state. So check with yours and see, is that a thing that happens? Because it might give you some frustration that you can prevent before it happens. Who has number 5? Oh. Thanks. Okay, is this better? Okay. So did you hear Bonnie's question then or no? Oh, rats. Okay. Well, her question was, as an administrator with the system access, can I delete or add students to M-Class rosters for grades K through 3? And she just said the short answer is no. So what I was saying is, no. Oh, sorry. No, with a lot of strength behind that. So the reason for that is, like I was saying, and you probably weren't able to hear me, is Sarah Taylor had to fix like 24,000 students on her own because people were doing this, we really can't continue to do that. So please be mindful that sometimes there's only one person that fixes those things, and it's going to take a really long time to get it done. So be mindful not to do that. And then who has number 6? Oh, excellent. If you could use the different mic. Oh, sorry about that.
So what do I do if a student has moved out of the LEA and the answer is found on page 7? You need to go into your SIS system and make sure that you put in the appropriate exit code so that the student will be taken out, and then Amplifi takes care of all the rest of it by removing them. You never delete.
Thank you. And just kind of thinking of that, making sure that they have the appropriate exit code and date, because if there's just the code and not the date, it's not going to happen. And if there's just the date, not the code, also not going to happen. So making sure you have both of those, the code and the date, are important. And then making sure the date is right, because we've had some of those issues as well. And then who has, is there a question, or are you 7? Oh, yes.
Are you going to somehow educate our SIS people on all of this information? Because that seems to be where the breakdown is.
Sure, great question. I appreciate that. So her question, in case you didn't hear it, was, are we going to... You're welcome, come in. Are we going to work with their SIS people to inform them on this? The question is no, because we don't have access. I have no idea who those people are, and there's thousands in the state, and I don't have access to who they are. So the job is that we give you the information, and you widely spread this so that they are aware of these things. So that is on the LEA to provide that information. Sure, I can talk to that team, and yep, Sid, will you just email me so I remember? Thank you. So Sid's going to send me an email to remind myself to talk to the IT team and make sure that they're sharing it with those people as well. And then who has number, I think are we on 6? 7. Oh, and it was you. I should have stayed over there. But the online friends can't hear you then. I know, even with your lovely yellow.
Where do I get a list of the codes for opt-out, alternative assessment, etc.? On page 7 and 8 at the bottom. And or you can ask the support staff at USB.
Yes. And one thing I want to add to that, and I'm sure, whoops. Oh boy. Let's try that again. One thing I'd like to add to that, I'm sure you noticed that you'll see Sid and Jen and I out a lot, which means we're not here a lot. So if you give us a voicemail, friends, I'm going to tell you right now, we are not going to respond to that as quickly as if you give us an email. So just kind of a heads up on that. Absolutely, I will return your calls. I'm not going to be like, nope, never return anyone's calls again. But just wanted you to know that email, we can get to it faster because we're often not here at the office. And so it'll be a much faster way to get a hold of you. So just kind of for your awareness as well. And then who has the last one, number 8? Oh, okay.
Okay, why is my completion report not showing 100%? And that answer was found on the top of page 9. And it's due to what Sarah's already mentioned, that students that move out of the system right now, they're working towards removing those at least monthly, hopefully in the future on a weekly basis. But then also students could be showing that are taking an alternate assessment and wouldn't take the DIBELS assessment.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Any other questions on this document? Nope. Bonnie? Yep.
How do we know which Sarah to contact?
Oh, this Sarah or the... Because there's not enough Sarahs in the world. Yay! So that's a really great question. What I would say is if you've run through all of these issues, that first question, I think it was the first one, that enrollment, or no, it was the second question. The troubleshooting one on page 3. So if you verified the information and everything is correct, contact me or Emily first. That works too. And a lot of people do that. They'll just say, greetings, Sarah's, and we're fine with that as well. That's fine too. But I would say At that point, if you've checked all those things, it's something we can probably look at. And if then we can't figure it out, then we refer to Amplifi. But you're welcome to email us both at the exact same time because you probably will get a faster response that way. Any other questions? All right.
All right. I have the fun part of doing the other Sarah Young's part of the day. She is out doing something else. So she's like, will you present the early reading software? I'm like, sure. I've been doing this for years. Why can't I do another? So here we go. So early reading software. The report is in. We had two pieces of the report this year. One was the kind of student fidelity, student outcomes component, as well as the qualitative study of what's working and what's not working around educational software. What are the barriers? What are the implementation successes? So we have a couple components in this part. These are just the current providers. There is an RFP being released in January to bring on similar or new or different providers, depending on who puts in and who qualifies. We will be putting a hefty load on it being evidence-based and some kind of external evaluation conducted to show that it works before they get on our list. That was not done in the initial years of this program, just so you're aware. In terms of program enrollment, a lot of this is just information that you can look at the slides if you're really curious. You can see which providers have more students in them or less. Some of that's just how much they hit the pavement and really get in your face. And some of it's just like, we really like this program and it's working for us. The top providers are Imagine Learning and Lexia Core 5 at this time. The next part is you're just reminding what dosage recommendations were for last year for fidelity. Depending on which product and what grade level, they have different requirements. Moving forward, the key finding was fidelity was improved greatly this year compared to previous years. So over here on the right side, you have improved 41% of students met vendors' average weekly use last year compared to 55%, while 60% met the total weeks recommendation last year. We have 77 meeting the weeks. So fidelity improved a lot, which is a nice piece. We have more students meeting the required minutes to possibly have those outcomes that we are seeking. This is the slide that I would love to make visual for you because people get lost in it and don't know how to read it. And this tells you if it's working or not. So I'm going to replace the last 3 years of data into a visual display in the next couple of weeks because people look at this and go, I either don't know how to read it, so great, whatever you tell me is fine, or it must be working because they put up numbers. And so that's what this has been kind of interpreted at. So basically what you have, just so you can kind of read it, down the left is your vendor. Then you have the N size, which is the number of students who met fidelity using that product. Okay, so it's not the number of students actually using it because some had like minimal use or a little, low. These are the fidelity students. The NS, the next column is your effect size. That's the, return on your investment of spending your time. What's a happy effect size in education? 0.4 is kind of where we're all in that happy Hattie leverage point, right? None of the products have a 0.4 effect size. I can put you there. And if you look at them, we have no effect size for iStation across these pieces. Then you're looking at Waterford. You have a 0.18. We do have a 0.54 in second grade for that particular group, so that one is above the 0.4. Imagine Learning, you can kind of see 0.25, 0.15, 0.12. No effect size for Success Maker in any of the categories. Core 5 had a 0.28, a 0.12, no effect, no effect. Reading Plus only works for third grade, no effect. And then Mayan is a 0.29 in kindergarten and a 0.24 in third grade with no effect in between. So is software working? No. Now, I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I have had software as a teacher, as an ELL director, and we saw it work, but we used it with fidelity. We gave instruction based on what we saw in the reports. We did things with the software, and that's why it worked. I'm not going to say software does not work, but the way we use software in the state, it does not work. Okay, so if you are a system that is using it well and you are seeing benefits, good for you. But most of our teachers use it as a babysitter of time that gives them some free moments, and that is not how instruction works with instructional software. We think it's going to solve our kids' problems. It's our intervention. I have Principals Institute. I have about 80 in there this year, and some of them list their software as their intervention for children. That's not your primary source of intervention, right? But some of your principals think it is. So we've got to look at how we're using it if we're going to continue to use it. It can work. I have had a huge effect size growth in the district I worked in prior in Alaska with software. but we used it very intentionally, and we pulled kids off to give instruction when they were stuck on a skill, right? And there was things that we did that made the software effective. It's not looking to be too effective on its own is kind of how it's being used right now. So please keep this in mind as you kind of look at what effective strategies are working for you. This is 7 software programs. This is not 2. It's not 3. Very few of them have an effect, and most of you could get that effect sitting on a couch over the summer. Like a 0.2 is like summer vacation. Like that is what you're getting. And kids are spending hours on this a week, right? So just be thoughtful, mindful about it. I'm going to try and convey this in a visual perspective because when the legislature sees this, they're like, oh, it's working. That was the comment at the end. It's so great that this is working so well. And I was like, we really don't know how to read tables. So keep that in mind as if you do share this with people, they probably don't know how to read it either. So just help people out a little bit. All right, so in terms of just kind of the overall pieces, schools are doing a better job of fidelity. I think we had a lot of fear since we did have people actually lose their licenses and that kind of thing. So we worked hard. I think we ended up losing 100 schools. If you were one of those places, we lost about 100 from the 400 and something we had. Recommendation is that USB will work with schools and vendors to continue to improve implementation. That was one of them. Students in high dosage. So students that used it more had larger gains. So again, fidelity does matter because we do like the barely used people, the kind of used people, and the really used people. And the kids that used it really did have better outcomes than those that didn't, which is a good thing. But we've got to kind of look at that. Sample sizes are variables you have to look at when you look at those effect sizes. When you have 112, that sample size can impact the outcome.
All of the kids within that N are part of the high dosage group?
Yes, good question. So his question was, all the kids in the N are the high dosage group. Yes, they had to meet the fidelity requirement. It can't be just the kids that got on it twice in that group. There is the full report if you want to read like the 60-page analysis and you want to go through it or look at your vendor specifically at each grade level. The report is available at this link. So you can go to the PowerPoint for today and just click on it and it'll take you to a Google Drive. It has a bunch of resources in there that Sarah's kind of put in to kind of give people lots of information. One thing you don't see on here is stop using software, right? That's not the recommendation we're giving. We're going to let you choose your choice, hopefully, as this literacy block grant comes along. Is that the strategy that's working for you? I saw software on some of your things, like some of it's working, some of it's not. Those will be those decisions that you get to make in terms of how effective it's working. Okay. Supporting schools as literacy directors, there's a little feedback that she wants you to kind of take a look at. There's a frequently asked questions, like why do I fail, or how does fidelity work, or those kinds of things, similar to kind of what Sarah did with you with the rostering project that's available at the link. So if she'd like me to pause here, so I'm going to pause here. You have 3 minutes to get on and look at if schools aren't using the software to fidelity, what can you do as a literacy director? So there's some little information, and then she would like to gather your ideas of how you've been supporting people and trying to get there so that she can kind of use that as a training tool for folks. Okay. And there's a difference between USB program requirements and fidelity, right? So looking at that, the opportunity, she's working with Senator Stevenson to change fidelity for next year to really put it at the board level to make those decisions, and the board is leaning towards local control. Like you guys decide what fidelity means. Okay, so if you'll just take a couple minutes, hopefully that's big enough for you to copy into your computer or your phone. But if you go back and listen to the November 15th education or public ed appropriations meeting, you will hear Senator McKay, I think it's Senator McKay, maybe it's Representative McKay, I don't know, Mr. McKay, say, wow, software's working. That was the ending point. So data was not explained, and that was probably part of the problem. So we kind of missed our opportunity. It was just posted, and one person in the room seemed to know what effect sizes were, and the rest does not. So it made it a little more challenging to kind of get the message across. We could have done a better job at communicating how effective it is. And this is one of those things, like if you have principals ask you, if I only have time 1 day a week, should I put kids on? Just say no. Usage matters. If you can't meet the minutes, it's not worth it. The data is very clear. The effect sizes are even less or not existent at all. for the kids that barely use it or kind of use it. If you can't meet fidelity, you might as well not get on it. Our data is really clear on that. And this is 3 years in a row. Hopefully you remember me in the last couple of years. Like, this is year 3. Jennifer's like, give it some time, Governor. Give it some time. And now I'm like, Governor, take it away. Not really. But I did have to convince them a couple years ago to let it play out a little longer. Lisa?
When you say fidelity, are you strictly speaking to time spent working in the software, or are you adding the component of teachers looking at the data and providing?
So in terms of this, it's just student usage for fidelity. When I say it works is when teachers look at the report. We're going to talk about a couple of the recommendations from the field. A lot of it's whether your leaders care enough to promote. Leadership seems to be a huge factor in how well the programs are implemented, but I'm still not seeing a lot of teachers using the reports for information. We're getting better at that, but if they would use the report when kids get stuck and say, I'm going to give instruction in that area, or the diagnostic assessment in iReady says this when we had iReady, I'm going to give some instruction, kids would benefit more greatly, is kind of what we're finding from these results, which leads me into maybe administrator commitment. So these are the best practices. So we asked, after a couple of years of this program, we said, okay, we're not doing well. Why are we not doing well? And where are the places that are doing it well? What have they figured out? Because they are getting their fidelity and such in. So best practices and lessons learned. First thing, administrator support. Like, they are committed to that software and they are supporting their teachers and getting their kids on. The next one is technology and infrastructure. You all know that if you don't have enough computers to get kids on, that's a problem. Or you don't have a strong enough Wi-Fi signal or consistent Wi-Fi, that's a problem as well. Scheduling time for program use. This was one of the best practices. Schools that had scheduled time, whatever it looks like across the week, were more likely to get their fidelity in because it was kind of built into the schedule rather than relying on the teacher to fit it in. Training on program use. So like, they had training from the professional development team from the software. That seemed to help. And then the trainers that would come back in and actually help the teachers read the reports, use the reports, that seems to be more effective than just that onboarding of, here's our software, enjoy, but really looking at the reporting part. The full report, if you're interested in the best practices and lessons learned, is available at that particular link. And that was just during the 2016-17. They kind of went out and looked at schools, and they made this little best practices checklist. So that might be something to share with your schools around what are the best practices we know around implementing software with fidelity, as well as like program outcome, like it actually works. That little tool might be helpful. Yes?
So I'm struggling. If it's not effective, why would I a lot of effort into doing it effectively?
Dane, I appreciate that you're it could be effective if we did it well, I think is what the best practices kind of showed. Like, we had schools that do it well and get outcomes out of it, but as a state, we do it not well, and so our outcomes are depressed. So I agree. Like, if I don't really, software's not my main strategy, I'm probably not going to take a lot of effort as the literacy person to go out. But if that is where a lot of my people are spending a lot of their time, I should probably help them do it well rather than doing it how we might currently be doing it. Yeah.
Do you have anything to compare, let's say, assuming 60 minutes per week is fidelity, we know that has a 0.2 or whatever effect size. Is there anything to compare the effect size versus using that 60 minutes for something else?
No. So we have not done a study that says if they were getting 60 minutes of small group intervention instead of software, what would that look like? We have not done anything like that. Okay. So we're not going to do this part because we're behind and Sarah will live. So there's a little checklist that you can give feedback on if you're interested in. There's also, they shared these with the providers to help them understand like best implementation practices so they can support the schools when they're out working with them as well. But they're downloadable and you can type into them and change them for your own purposes at your LEA level. The next thing, closing thoughts. Fidelity did improve, but it's showing it is improving early literacy, but is it substantial or significant? Not really. Okay, like 0.28. We did have a 0.54 in one grade level with one provider. So there, I guess you could say it works. Way to go, Waterford, in second grade. Sorry, I have an update that I won't do because I don't have time for that. Looking at that targeted implementation, if you want software to work in your buildings, you have to get the teachers to look at the reports. It's probably the number one thing people aren't doing. If they would look at the reports and give instruction based on where kids are struggling, kids would improve and in strategic ways. Okay. that doesn't come out in a fidelity report. Like, we don't track how many times do teachers get in and look at the system. We've been asked to do that. It was like, that's not going to happen. How many times are teachers using the lessons that come out of the program? We don't track those kinds of things at this point. Okay, but they do have some tools that can be used during PLCs or other discussions to help teachers give instruction in those areas of need. All right, we are going to move on to the updates with Miss Sarah. Oh, we're going to Sid here. Oh, Sid is here. I started with Sid because I want to make sure she got some time. Sid is here from assessment to talk just a little bit of updates on Sage writing.
Hello. Hey. Oh, yes. No. I did, but that's okay. I'll just talk about them. Yes, but that's okay. I'll just talk through them. So just a reminder about Sage writing. That this year we have one writing prompt in grades 3 through 8. Students will have a random, it'll be randomized whether they see an informative prompt or an opinion prompt. As a reminder, the new condition codes that will be flagged are prompt copy match and duplicate text. They're both set at 70%. That's when they get flagged. So if a student in prompt copy match copies more than 70% of what they have written, comes directly from the passages, so they've actually only written 30% or less of the writing, then they get flagged with that prompt copy match code. If they receive either of those two flags, prompt copy match or duplicate text, they will automatically get sent to hand scoring. So in the past, we had it set up so that they automatically received the lowest score possible. They all got a 1. And as we reviewed, especially in 3rd and 4th grade, we found that although they copied a lot of their text, what they did have in writing still warranted some score. Probably not the highest scores, but what they had there still warranted some scoring for some of them. Now, that's not to say that you won't get any students that receive that flag at all, because after it goes to hand scoring, if the human scorer reads it and says, this is completely copied, it will get the lowest score or the 1 for those. Our recommendation is that you really promote the benchmark assessments. They can do interims as well. Both of these flags work in the interims and the benchmark systems. But if a teacher administers a benchmark Sage for writing, or for any of the content areas, any of the grades, the teacher is able to look at how the student responded. They're able to see the exact what the students wrote. They're able to see the prompts and to say, here's the passages that they read, here's what the students wrote, and it'll tell you that flag if they got a prompt copy match or if they got a duplicate text. Or it will tell you if they didn't get any of those flags and you want to look at students' writing and see the scale scores of how the students performed. You can see that in the benchmark writing. I think that was it for writing. Any other questions? All right, go team.
Thanks. All right, there it is. So just wrapping up, if you have or have not, I know some of you have gone to Plain Talk in the past. It is in New Orleans every year. It is February 26th to the 28th. And you'll notice I didn't add all of the presenters up there, but I added some of them that you might be a little more familiar with. Archer, Shanahan, Kilpatrick, and so on. And actually, I just want to point out that the little quote up here that Plain Talk is Woodstock of literacy is from our very own Susan Henry. So thought that was pretty exciting. The legislative session this year is from January 22nd until March 5th. So just so you are aware, and like Jen said, that literacy block piece would likely come up within the first couple weeks. So we're looking at the end of January for that to kind of be a hot topic. And then I know you're excited for the next one. January 16th is our next literacy director meeting. And I can't remember, is that one in Basement West or is it up here? That one's in Basement West. Okay. So hopefully have a few less tech issues with that. But January 16th is the next one. And then we also have the UAS CD conference. Thank you to Becky, who I don't know if she's still in the room, sent that to us. Oh, yes, you're standing. But they're going to have Nancy Fry coming on March 1st. It's at the Radisson in Salt Lake, and you can, as of tomorrow, you can register. So that's pretty exciting. The link is on there on the PowerPoint. And then our last slide, I believe it's the last slide. Almost. So the summer professional learning opportunities. So last year we did some summer stuff. We did some the year before. We're kind of wondering what you're wanting for this year. One idea we had was the Launching Reading Institute that some of you, I think, partook in. That was a K1 session for 2 days and then a 2-6 session for two more days that we did in 3 different locations in the state. But we had such a long waiting list on that, and so we had to turn a lot of people away because we just can only fit so many people in rooms. And so we thought about running that again to open it up again in the summer to have teachers come. But we're kind of just wanting your feedback on what you're wanting for the summer. That was the idea that we had, is something that we've already done but maybe didn't get enough people involved in. But we'd love to hear your feedback on that. And you're welcome to think about it, stew about it, ask your teachers, and send us an email, just whatever. We'll gather information. But does anyone have anything they'd like to add right now? Or you're like, I'm done. You guys have talked about way too much. I'm stuck on the literacy block. I haven't listened since then. Yes.
We got some really good feedback on the writing training that was offered, and it got full.
Which one is it? Just so is it the assessment one that going on right now? Okay. So Sid,
and
kudos.
They just filled up right away, and there were waiting lists for that, and so the second session, I think. So I don't know if it's the same one. The second session for the Salt Lake area was held in Nebo, ironically. And so if we could offer more of those more often than throughout, I think that was well received. Those were good trainings.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else before Jen wraps it up?
Because we have a few minutes, I'm going to talk to you about KEEP. We didn't think we'd get to it today, but we got to it. So I don't have slides. You don't have to worry about it. That's Sarah Young if you want something about digital teaching and learning, aka early reading software. Her info's up there. But to wrap the day, we got cut scores Tuesday. Done for the KEEP. Yep, it's December, November. But it takes a while to get all this stuff done and to do all the analytics and stuff on a new assessment. So the psychometrics part is complete. So we do have cut scores. We will be doing our own analysis, but from the initial kind of drafty version, literacy-wise, statewide, 61.4% are incoming at a level that we would expect for an incoming kindergartner. So with the cut score of level 3 is what we're calling it. That we have about 61% coming in at literacy levels that would be adequate, and then numeracy is 72.5. So those are kind of initial numbers. They are likely to change once we actually do our in-house kind of work, but they're probably going to stay pretty similar to that. In terms of kind of cuts below that, at the highest level, you had 61.4. In literacy, the middle level, which is level 2, you have about 15% that kind of fell into that space that aren't proficient, but not to the bottom of where we are calling level 1. Level 1, we have about 24% of the kids coming in with, basically you can think of those as your zeros that you all had at some point that were just kind of straight across zeros. So about 24% came at the lowest levels in literacy. Numeracy, like I said, 72.5 came in at level 3, 18.7 at level 2, and 8.8 at level 1. So not as much of a discrepancy, which we kind of expect in numeracy as we have in literacy in terms of that level 1 component. We will be releasing a press release soon with just some generic information, and then we'll release a more full report, like what are the bottom categories in performance? Where are kids struggling the most between birth to 5 and preparation for kindergarten, so that we can start using that for our preschool programming, our resources for parents, as well as birth to 5 programming. And we'll be sharing that statewide, so it'll go to kind of our early year providers that really focus on that birth to 5 group. We'll be working with our preschool systems within your own LEAs to really help them see where the gaps are. One that we're pretty much certain of is phonemic awareness at this point. It seems to be a significant gap. Most kids could not do first sounds, and it is part of preschool curriculum and core standards, and it is a huge predictor of future academic success. So phonemic awareness will be something that we'll be hitting with our preschool programs, but we'll also look at, are there parent opportunities for some of that work? So in terms of more data, we'll have more out to you probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks with like an actual physical report of where each LEA fell. Like, okay, state average is 61.4. where are we? Maybe we're 40, maybe we're 80. Like, let's see where the kids are coming into your own LEA in comparison to other LEAs. So we'll release things like that. There'll be a lot of data coming out. They're running it for us as we speak. So we'll get that to you so you can kind of see. In terms of the system being updated in the data gateway, at this point, it's pretty null and void for the kindergarten teachers. If you want to tell them what a cut score would be so they could know, to be a level 3 in literacy, you had to get 47 of the, we changed the point values, but you had to get 47 points of 108. The old system was a little different, so it may not be perfect if they look at their kids. Middle range, level 2, you had to get 26 points, and then anything below that was a level 3. And then numeracy, you had to get 29 of the 36 points. Again, we had to do some rescoring on a couple items. So if you remember the oral language one that had 30 points, well, no kid got 30. So we rescored that item in a different way, that if you had this many responses, you got 0 points, 1 point. It ended up being out of a 4-point value, and that's what brought down the literacy totals a little bit. And then the rote counting, well, if you counted to 20, you got 20 points, and that's a hefty weight, so we brought that down to a 3-point scale. If you counted to a certain number, maybe it's a 4-point scale. Do you remember, Sid? It's probably 4. If you counted to like 1, I think you got 0 points. If you counted between 1 and 5, you got 2 points, and so on. So we had to redo some of the scoring based on student performance to make it more accurate and to help with the weighting. If you can imagine on the numeracy, it was only 58 points or something, and you had 20 points just whether they could count or not. It kind of could skew data. So we adjusted some point values, so it was 4. Okay. So 29 was proficient, 18 was level 2, and anything below 18 would be a level 1. So our next steps are to work on reporting, like what would the reporting look like? We almost have the entry redone based on the feedback. We had a lot of feedback on the entry and just like prompting and support, like how many times can I give this prompt? We basically just said prompt as much as necessary. So there's some changes on some of those pieces. We'll release the exit assessment. Hopefully our goal is like December 21 is what looks in our notes. I'm hoping before that, but December 21st is our goal to have the exit draft. And when I say draft, it's draft. The items will be what the items are. You will not see scoring at this point. You won't see accommodated instructions, but at least teachers will get a feel of what kinds of items their kids are going to be tested on. So we will email that out probably to ADs and LDs and CDs so that you can release that to your kindergarten teachers. Trust me, there are some items that are going to throw your kinder teachers if they don't see the test before they get to the end of the year. So please share it widely with them and help them to see, like, reverse equation. The kids are going to be asked blank equals blank plus blank. Most of your kindergarten teachers never reverse an equation, and it's always the other way. Kids are going to need to know both ways. So that's one example. Another is we're expecting writing. Like, we're going to give the kids a prompt and they're going to have to write about it. So we have some good rigorous expectations aligned with the core in there that if your teachers aren't doing some of that rigor, they're going to want to see the test in preparation. Not to teach to it, but to teach the skills, which are the standards that are there. Questions about the KEEP? Things you want me to make sure you know when we release data? Yeah, right, Becky? For the exit, we'll have, she asked, do we have any indication on the length of time? Length of time is kind of questionable, partly because some of it will be whole group, a lot of it will be small group, and some of it will be individual. So when we release the test, we will have like what kind of structure they'll be done in. For example, the writing, they just thought, well, some kids will finish quick, some kids will take 30 minutes. We're not necessarily going to time it, but it's going to be done in small group instruction, and so the teacher can kind of monitor, like when that group's done in 5 minutes and that's really all they can produce, they can go away and I can bring my next group who might take 15 or 20. We'll probably put a max cut because we don't want kids sitting just like Sage for an hour in kindergarten writing. Like, give them a little time, and if they can't do any more in that time, let's cut it off. But a lot of it's suggested from the kindergarten teacher's small group. So a lot of the items will be done in a small group setting, so that hopefully they could do that during their rotations when they're doing centers or something to make that work. There's a few items that are individual, so they'll probably still need that testing time for the individual stuff, but not too many. We tried to get as much as we could in small and whole group. So when you see the test, we'll try and put some times, or at least we tried out some of the items so we know how long some of them take, but some of the other items we just haven't piloted, so we don't know, like, this one should take 30 seconds. This one takes 20 minutes. So it will be something we'll work on with our tests for sure. Other questions? Okay. we're going to get you out of here on time today. I didn't think that was possible. Let me throw this at you. Are you ready? I got all your feedback. I combined it into one sheet because I need organization. One of the things that came out was putting certain percentages on how much you can spend on a particular item. So, for example, it's a literacy block, but we don't want the kindergarten specialist to get really excited and think all the money is for OEK, right? So is there some kind of barricades we can put on the money? So as I kind of looked at it, well, $7.5 million was about 25% of the new grouping of 30.1 million. Should we put some constraints in there that say up to a certain amount or percentage can be used for certain strategies? Are you guys okay with that? We wanted to leave a lot of flexibility, but I can see the worry around, well, it's a K3 literacy, but we're going to put all of it into OEK, and then there's no money left for literacy. That could be problematic. So, and the other component was the K6 continuum. We still want to focus on K3. Should we do like an 80% needs to go to K3 and you up to, at least, and then if you want to use more, great. But if you want to use that 20% freed up for something else, does that sound all right? This is just Jennifer like on the cuff, like brainstorming with you because I want to make sure I get this right, at least the draft version. I'll send it back out to you and you can give me some feedback, but that was a couple of common points of feedback was we're worried how this might get settled out when you meet with your friends who are involved in some of these projects, and to make sure we don't lose that literacy funding to something like OEK, because OEK a lot of people are really passionate about and it does work, but we need funding for all things too. So, all right, I will put some little barricades around the money and we'll go from there. One of the things that came up that I thought was, just for clarity, is that around the scientifically evidence-based interventions, we will be expecting that they are those now, not anything that you find on Pinterest or that kind of thing. Like, that will be explicitly in this bill. Someone recommended the ESSA language. I'll look at that. I think it's pretty good, because you can't find everything evidence-based in education, but you can certainly find if it's scientifically based, at least. So we'll have a little more meat in that. Like I said, I don't think we're going to get to the point that we mandate you have to only use the products we come up with, but they're going to be highly recommended. So we'll pull teams of people together to review high-quality interventions and create lists to give you a resource to go to. But I also don't want to say you found something else that hasn't been reviewed, you can't use it. So we've got to kind of broker that a little bit. And just trying to see here any other big changes that might be. I think those are kind of the big ones. The DIBELS 4 through 6, raise your hand if you're interested in that opportunity of a mandate, not an option. That's what I was curious. Okay. Because some of you were like, yeah, mandate it, and others are like, so, yeah. No, I'm saying if we paid for it, not out of your money, if we were to mandate. So raise your hand. If we were to mandate it but pay for it, you would be okay. I see about 60%. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because I was like, go ahead. So in terms of our early reading assessment, that's a whole different, it's not any of your literacy block stuff. It's a different funding source. At this time, we're doing DIBELS. With SRI, because it's 4 through 6, there might be some potential there. There is conversation around changing the early reading assessment. I didn't bring it up today because I don't know how likely it is. I don't even want to go there. So we're just going to pretend DIBELS is safe and in a happy place. But that is the potential around, should it just be like a K6 assessment? SRI has some valid uses for sure. DIBELS is just a little shorter, and so just that timing and the continuous lens from a K6 student perspective, right? You can look at, you get a Lexile out of DIBELS, which is what SRI gives you and some of those things, but we could definitely, I'll put that in the wheel to kind of spin around. Other thoughts today? You guys were amazing. I hope you feel like you got to say something today, even though you didn't get to say it. I promise I took a lot of notes from your notes. So we will send out a new draft of this in the coming week or so. And I decided December 11th from 9:30 to 11, somewhere where I can find space. We will hold the next meeting for this if you want to participate. A lot of you sent me an email. I saw that you want to join the group. So I will email if you've emailed me the 9:30 to 11, December 11th, most likely here at the USBE if I can find a space for us to go to the next steps. Next steps would be really digging into accountability, digging into if you fail, what are the repercussions, or really in our minds, the supports that you would receive if you were a failing district in the program. We will not take away your money. Okay, that is not the goal. So if you want to mark your calendar for December 11th from 9:30 to 11, please do, because Sarah and I have lots of work to do on this in the next few weeks. Thank you. Have a great day.